Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube. Back with the Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. I'm actually going to do a couple here this early in the morning. I'm going to do one now, one later, later on. Um, deciding what this video to do first is always an interesting choice. So I'll do mine. A lot of people have been covering the shadows on the wall thing about how Roger Collins was supposed to be this killer. I can only tell you from a standpoint of a viewer when I knew Roger wasn't going to be a killer, okay? And here's when I knew when I watched the show in the 90s. When I first knew. Again, cuz keep in mind the internet is not it hasn't exploded yet. It's you can get on websites, okay? There are Yahoo chat. I think Yahoo chat rooms were a thing. I think I'm old, but um, with Roger here, when did I know he wasn't going to be a killer? Because I didn't try to look things up about Dark Shadows, but I sort of read Roger as a character and like, okay, he seems like he could be a killer. And when I figured that out is, when you're trying to pedal your son down the road, I'm gonna get into what David does here again, and then I'll do my Dark Shadows attitude video later. By the way, um, when Roger crushes the frosted glass, if you will, um, the cup, he's mad that his sister has invited someone to the house. I'm thinking, okay, this dude's got issues, right? He's got some psychotic issues, right? That's your first real hint. That's your first real hint right there. Not the argument with his sister when he crushes the glass. You know? So your next real hint that he's sort of crazy and a bit psychotic is how he goes completely mad dog when Victoria mentions Burke Devlin for the first time on Widow's Hill about how Burke Devlin gave her a ride to town, and he loses his shit. Then he pounds on Sam Evans's door. Uh, so there are moments you can look at Roger and go, okay, this guy could have been a killer, right? From a viewer standpoint, when I'm watching as a viewer, there are moments you can tell Roger is not going to be a killer. Let me tell you from my standpoint when I saw those moments. Okay, if you're still going to turn a character, if you're still going to turn Roger into a killer, if your goal is to still turn Roger into a killer, again, this is before the first ghost. This is before Vicky sees a ghost in the drawing room before we see Josette coming out of the portrait. This is well before that. All right. This is he removed the brake, the bleeder valve. David removed his dad's his brake device. We'll say. So when Roger, who has been yelling at everybody, is calm with Burke, but doesn't yell at him at first. He doesn't appear too psychotic there. Okay, he appears pretty normal. Yeah, yeah. Also, yelling isn't a sign of being psychotic. Um, when Roger gets into the accident, survives it, and he's just like, if you're psychotic, okay, if you're a psychotic killer, and I'm not going the Michael Myers level, the Jason level, the Freddy level. I'm not going to that level. I'm just going from a normal level. From a level of, okay, this guy became a psychopath and decided to murder people. He wants to murder Vicky, he wants to hurt his son, etc. That's how I'm judging. I've judged this back then, and that's how I'm judging this now. Okay, here's a telltale sign. After his accident, Elizabeth comes to Roger after and says to him, "I need you. You're the one who hired Victoria." And he looks at her like, "Are you nuts? Like, are you on something? Look like." And she's hinting around. That's how she wants it played. And Roger picks up on it. And he's like, then he gets this look like, oh, okay, but I want to know the real truth. Why did you bring her here? Because it is you that brought her here. And she goes, nope. And she dangles, him, living in the house over her set. Again, this guy is supposed to be. This is where, to me, Roger's plans are first sort of acts to being a killer. Because if you're a killer, why do you give a shit? Seriously, you don't. You're not going to give a shit why some girl's here to tutor your kid if you're a killer. Give credit where credit's due to Lewis Edmonds, for building intrigue in Roger Collins. Those are sort of your the start of your telltale, not the start of it, but though that's one telltale sign that I knew Roger wasn't going to be a killer. I actually gave two. What's another sign? When he doesn't kill Victoria, when he has every opportunity to. Uh, and again, I'm trying to think if I need to save that one for last. No, I'll use it now. He's supposed to be a killer, right? David's got busted for the bleeder valve. Victoria is, or not, or at least David's been accused of the bleeder valve by Victoria. Roger's out searching for David. Roger comes home. Victoria is by herself. She saw a figure in the drawing room, a ghost. Roger could kill her here and just say she ran off. What's to stop it? What's to stop it? Another moment comes later. I'll get to it. No, it's not the moment in the car. It's not the pen. I'll get to that though. Roger, when they bring David home, what does Roger really do to receive David? I mean, I know he smacks him, but is really smacking a receipt when your own kid, just tried to kill you? Not to me. It's just like right here, again, this guy is supposed to be a killer. There are hints in Dark Shadows. No, that's not the case. He's not going to be a killer. So I've already made up my mind. This guy is not a killer because he's gonna get a second opportunity at Vicky and then a third, and he does nothing. Here comes the second opportunity. You ready? When David locks Victoria in the room and no one knows where Victoria is. No one knows where Victoria, David knows. Now Roger figures it out, and only Roger figures it out. Roger, who's supposed to be your killer, right? No one knew where Victoria was. David did. Roger figured out. Roger goes there. Here's your killer. Here's your killer, and I use that term so loosely now. Doesn't make any effort to kill. He tortures her. Victoria, like, this is like this is like junior high shit right here. This is somebody doing that. Like, he's pretending he's a ghost. Oh my god. Lewis Edmonds, great actor. Um, that again, that's where that's another moment I'm like, okay, this guy. So here now the writers have to try to deceive you into thinking Roger killed Bill Malloy. I'm gonna give a lot of credit here to the writers and to Lewis Edmonds, but let me say this: as much as a good a job as they did, I'm thinking, well, wait a second. Here's a guy who's supposed to be a killer. Who's he killed? Yeah, we know the car thing's gonna come later, but I'm talking from a sense of you know strangling somebody, stabbing somebody. When you find out about the death of Bill Malloy, when they're building the death of Bill Malloy, this is what the writers are trying to paint to you. Roger Roger took the pen off Carolyn, the pen that Burke Devlin gave her. It's there's only 3 pens like it in the world, um, or two, or I forget how many. One Mr. Blair has, the other Roger has now. So now Roger buries the pen because he's being questioned by Burke and by the sheriff. And they catch him in the act, and he's like, "Look, I did not kill Bill Malloy. I just didn't want scandal to come from." So Roger sort of doesn't do himself any favors by doing this. He makes himself a suspect. Okay. Which again is interesting. But he's no killer. And I knew it by this point. Again, he's had opportunities. Yes, in a soap, you can argue with me or debate with me that you build longer suspense plot. But there also comes a point in time where a character where actions speak louder than words. The action of actual murder or attempted murder would have spoke louder than any word could have, and it really would have. To give a comparison to my favorite fictional serial killer, Michael Myers, this is where Michael you gave Michael all these opportunities. I guarantee you he's gonna act. I mean, Roger has more opportunities to kill people than Michael did. Or at least he's got as much opportunity, and he's not. So, when I look at, don't get me wrong, I have given the Raiders credit for trying to pin the pin up on Roger. Now, is Matthew Morgan a good direction? Sure, Matthew Morgan has displayed as much psychotic level as Roger has, and he actually has shown he has a violent temper. The most, Roger has put his hand over Vicky's mouth. Okay, he put his hand over Vicky's mouth. So what? Matthew Morgan has actually grabbed Victoria Winters by the wrist, like shook her. I'm like, this dude's crazy. He's probably gonna be a killer. Um, I think them going to Matthew Morgan was smart because they did. I think by the time I'd like to think by the time the writers did the Bill Malloy 9 angle, I think they had realized that making Roger a killer now is going to be a tough sell because what had the most he's the only person he's killed is a person we haven't seen, a person we haven't met, and we're sort of getting the sense that he's the one who drove the car. He before they do the Phoenix arc, you get the sense Roger's the one who drove the car all those years ago. And again, you say, well, Roger would have wanted to kill Bill Malloy because of, he didn't want the truth to get out. I'm not denying he could have been a killer, but by this point, that's going to be a tough sell to make for me when he's had other opportunities. Again, when Vicky sees Bill Malloy's ghost, when Roger goes up into that room, what happens? Roger just tries to scare her off. And, the third moment for me, when Vicky's alone with him in a car, again, now you could say that's the most tense moment, and it is. But I'm thinking, Roger's had better opportunities to kill her, and this to me is not the best moment to kill her because I gather the sense that Roger is just so annoyed with Burke Devlin being there. And he's really annoyed that she's still there, Colin. He says to her, she goes, I don't know what you want from me. He goes, the only thing I want you to do is leave. I mean, he says it in such a way. It's like it's not serial killer esque. It's matter of fact. Like, I just want you to leave. So, yes, did I know Roger was supposed to be killer? Yes, way back when. Um, I get, but because I figured that out by myself watching it. But as the show's going along, the show's giving you hints that's not going to be the case. Whether it means to or not, it is giving you those hints. Um, you know, and the reason I think it's easy to go back to Shadows on the Wall and say, well, Roger was supposed to be this crazed killer. Well, there are moments of crazed from Roger in the series from the beginning. In the beginning, but again, like I said, me speaking as a viewer, um, you sort of have to determine at your own point when that moment sort of it's not going to happen. And I was able to determine that back then, and still today. Again, Dark Shadows gives you little hints. Okay, this guy is supposed to be a psychotic killer. There are some moments of craziness, and he's acting a bit crazy, but it's not about just acting crazy when you're a psychotic killer. For me, from my standpoint, it's also about if you have a opportunity to act and get away with it, you do. From a serial killer standpoint, from a fictional standpoint, because again, if Dark Shadows giving Roger that opportunity, the character of Roger, Lewis Edmonds' character, the opportunity to commit murder and nothing happening, or at least attempt murder, and he doesn't do it, you sort of have to raise eyebrows as, okay, is this dude really a killer? Obviously not, because he's had the opportunity and he hasn't done jack and shit. And Jack's left town. So for me, I knew Roger wasn't going to be a killer very early on. Simply because I think Dark Shadows drops enough hints. That's not what they're gonna do. And I think those hints are right there. I mean, look, I'm not saying, again, I'm not sitting here saying Roger couldn't have been a killer. Yeah, he absolutely could have, but how do I put this? There's a moment where you either gotta, you know, it's now or never moment. Okay. Well, if you don't pull the trigger now, then when are you going to pull the trigger? Because you're sort of giving Roger a lot of opportunities to hurt people, but he's not doing it. And you know he's not doing it as a viewer. So when those moments don't come and you're watching the show for the first time, you're sort of going, well, wait, this this guy was supposed to be a killer. It's like, okay, yes, soaps build up longer suspense. That's all well and good. But again, when you get into what a killer is, what a murderer is, I'm not just meaning a slasher. I'm not just meaning somebody with a knife. I mean somebody who could choke somebody to death, or bludgeon them to death, or whatever you want to say, or accidentally cause their death and just kill them anyway. And they don't do that, and they're not doing that when they're getting the opportunity. Again, he has plenty of opportunity to kill Victoria. Why doesn't he do it or attempt it? Because that's not where the show's going. Because that's not where the show's taking the character. If the show was going to take the character that way, and you could tell they're not, then guess what? Then he's not going to be a killer. Again, he could have been a killer. There are signs of that, but there are also signs that Matthew Morgan could have been a killer too. why why do I give, I guess, that a break? He doesn't. You could say, well, Matthew Morgan doesn't act. Let me tell you when Matthew Morgan's guilty. The moment he pushes Bill Malloy's body back, he lies. He not only pushes Bill Malloy's body back into the ocean, he flat out lies that it was seaweed. Roger didn't go see the body. If it's Roger, then okay. It's not Roger. Matthew Morgan's examining it. And it's like, well, why are you lying? There's your first, there's your hint. It's not Roger. Right there. When Bill Malloy, or sorry, not Bill Malloy, sorry, when Matthew Morgan is sent to see if the girls really saw a body. Now, we know they did. By the way, Victoria Winters, Alexandra Moltke, what a screamer. That girl has a set of runs on her. She could scream. It's a great thought when you're looking at the character of Roger. But again, I think Dark Shadows drops enough hints that that's not going to happen. But it's up to you, the viewer, to examine them and decide what they're really trying to tell you. Again, I can only tell you from my standpoint. I can't tell you from everybody else's standpoint. And that's, it's not my job to tell you from everybody else's standpoint. Um, I can't. Again, I do think from Roger's standpoint that, yeah, he could have been a killer, but there's moments the writers and Lewis Edmonds are sort of giving you these subtle hints that that's not going to be the case. All right, guys, gals, I'll see you later for another Dark Shadows video. You have a good day.